Adam will get your
You don't actually put the text in. Yeah, I'm going to give a small talk first and then so we'll do the text.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Jocelyn Robinson. I work for HILA, which is a Jewish Resource Center, and I also am part of the JSU. I'm the chair of the JSU, which is the Jewish Student Union.
My name is Danny Stein. I am a former president of Alpha Epsilon Pi, which is the Jewish fraternity on campus, founding member of the JSU, and Jewish student here on campus.
Hi, my name is Naomi Zahn. I am a member of the JSU, and I'm the president of the Santa Cruz Israel Action Committee.
What I can tell you is this issue is contentious and it's really hard to solve. If it wasn't, we wouldn't all be here. But this resolution is unprincipled because its supporters have historically remained stonily silent when it comes to the appalling regimes that populate Israel's neighborhood, such as Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and do not admit such a peep when large-scale bombings of Israeli civilians emanate from the West Bank or when rockets from Gaza target these civilians. They target Israel, and only Israel. This is anti-Semitic, not just anti-Israel. They criticize Israel for security measures when Israel is the only side, it seems, trying to stop the violence. Boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning from Israel is not the same as boycotting South African apartheid in the 1980s. 22% of Israel's parliament is made up of the Arab bloc, which is more than Israel's total Arab population of 20%. The official languages of Israel are Hebrew and Arabic. Arab Israelis serve as justices on the High Court, have actually condemned high Israeli officials, serve in the army, and are an integral part of Israel's society. This is clearly not apartheid, nor is it racial segregation under the law. The West Bank territories were taken in self-defense, which is legal under international law as well, leaving Israel the legal administrator of those areas pending a final, legal, and negotiated resolution. UN Security Council Resolution 242 gives Israel the legal right to be in the West Bank. This resolution allows Israel to administer the territories it won in 1967 until a just and lasting peace in the Middle East is achieved. But clearly, peace hasn't been achieved. This resolution, the one that CJP just presented in front of you, is unjust because the premise is that Israel is required to bring about peace on their own is profoundly misplaced. It was Israel to offer an independent Palestinian state and rejected by Palestinians in 2008. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005 and has given back 91% of the land it won in the Six-Day War, a defensive war. And it has been the Palestinian leadership that has refused to even participate in peace negotiations in the last several years. The ruling body of Gaza is Hamas. Their charter states that the time will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them, until the Jews hide behind the rocks and the trees. Since Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, 8,000 rockets have been launched into Israel. Over 1 million Israelis, which includes Jews, Christians, and Arabs, live under rocket fire. Despite this constant threat, the Israeli army calls and drops leaflets on civilians in order to warn them before attacking military targets in close proximity to civilians. No other military does such a thing. No other military has such a low civilian casualty rate. By supporting the BDS resolution that was just presented in front of you, you are blatantly supporting anti-Semitism. When the Jewish state is demonized, when Israel's defensive actions are blown out of all sensible proportion, when comparisons are made between Israel and South Africa, this is anti-Semitism, not legitimate criticism of its government. When criticism of Israel is applied selectively, when Israel is singled out by groups for human rights abuses, when the behavior of actual abuses is ignored, this is anti-Semitism. And when Israel's fundamental right to exist is denied and delegitimized alone among the nations of the world, this too is anti-Semitism. This resolution is anti-Israel. This resolution is not just critical of Israel, and this resolution is anti-Semitic. The CJP has claimed that this resolution does not call for divesting from Israel. Boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning U.S. companies that do business with Israel is boycotting Israel. Do not be deceived. You are agreeing to give up your phones, your computers, cancer-saving technologies, agricultural innovations, and more. And as a staunch gay rights supporter myself, think of it in these terms. If this is the same as if you were asked to boycott, divest, and sanction companies that support gay rights and gay marriage, but that this wasn't against homosexuality. CJP claims that they are not, and I quote directly from their UC Divest Facebook page, "Our resolution does not call for divestment from Israel. Our bill targets U.S. and multinational corporations that are profiting from the military occupation of Palestinian territories." And then this is separate from the wider BDS movement. First and foremost, Israel's occupation is legal under international law. And second, the infographics they have used to cite the national BDS website. The resolution that they just presented is an exact copy of what was presented at UC Riverside. An exact copy, ladies and gentlemen. UCR prides itself on being part of the national BDS movement.
So real quickly, address me.
Sorry.
And no attack on personal people. Sorry, I don't know how long you're sitting in. I didn't want to interrupt you. So address me the entire time. And please stop targeting certain individuals. Right? Go ahead. Okay. I know it's hard because it's written down, but just keep.
Yeah, no, without question. But to say that this isn't part of the national BDS movement, that it's not a movement against Israel and its citizens and the Jewish community, seems rather absurd to me. If the proponents of this resolution were serious about supporting human rights, they focused on building a Palestinian economy, increasing education, dialogue, and cooperation between groups, decreasing the influence of radical groups who promote violence, fostering reconciliation between the two populations, and demand that Arab governments where Palestinian refugees currently reside to grant them citizenship, the right to work, the right to own property, and the right to inherit property. Instead, these pro-divestment advocates are trying to turn this conflict into a zero-sum game. Proponents of divestment do not speak of peace, reconciliation, or coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians in this resolution. You can look at the language itself. They do not encourage constructive engagement between the bridge building, and they seem to oppose the idea of a two-state solution. It's possible to be both pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, but this is not the way to do it. Do not let your legacy at UCSC be a vote for divestment. If you want to pull up that text, then I can.
So to let you all know, I have your presentation ending at 7:55, and then the entire conversation at 8 o'clock.
So if you want to scroll down, actually down to like the part where we're talking about the individual corporations. Let's go up a little bit, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's down at the computer again, I apologize. It's like probably like page 5.
But it is not capital.
Oh, sorry. So you can scroll up just like okay. So the first is that the idea that the International Court of Justice somehow is international law. And it's not. This was an advisory committee, and it's been recognized by the UN. Not only that this was not international law, but that Israel wasn't allowed to present in front of the ICJ. And in fact, if you scroll down, it actually has like a list of countries that didn't support the fact, like the ICJ's decision, or being involved in determining whether the wall that separates East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem at all anyway. So if you want to scroll down a little bit. And I'll be happy to provide this for individual sentences as well, because I know that there's a lot of stuff on here. Okay. So the United States, Australia, Belgium, Cameroon, Canada, the Czech Republic, Federation States of Micronesia, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Japan, the Marshall Islands, the Netherlands, Norway, Peru, the Russian Federation, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom all submitted objections on various grounds against the ICJ's hearing of this case. And this is from the U.S. House of Representatives. You can look at all of our sources. They're all on this document. I'm just going to keep going down a little bit.
Keep going down.
Yeah, just keep going down. Just kind of do it slowly. Sorry, because like, we just found out about this over the day, so we're trying to kind of come back. Okay.
You up?
You can keep going. Okay, so here's the person about caterpillar. You can keep going down a little bit. Danny asked a question about what about the PA? Because we're supposed to be contesting the fact that the UC system is investing in Caterpillar. I did quite a bit of research. I couldn't actually find any direct investments in Caterpillar, but when CJP is willing to provide those sources, I'd be happy to see them. I do know that the Palestinian Authority, which has been elected, apparently it's contested by CJP, but they represent the Committee for Justice in Palestine. Somehow that this is not legitimate, but they do actually invest in this company themselves.
She's attacked us repeatedly. I feel like that needs to be called out.
You're continually saying CJP and you're attacking them. Can you please refrain from doing so? And instead not associating the PA with CJP? That was a direct association. I'm not comfortable
My apologies, I didn't mean to directly associate them. This is actually a copy of the divestment bill that you just saw presented, and all the blue is what I've added, and these are our sources. So the cement roadstones holding sells cement and other construction materials used to construct military checkpoints, Israel's separation wall settlements, and Israel-only transportation network, and other infrastructure related to projects. Okay, here's the real fact. The settlements are not illegal. You can see that above. I announced it in my speech. The checkpoints and the security fence are legitimate security measures that Israel took over after the Second Intifada, where thousands of Israeli citizens were murdered by Palestinian terrorists during the Second Intifada. As this terrorism has subsided, Israel has removed most of these checkpoints. Palestinians can move relatively freely in the West Bank, according to most human rights groups. The human rights groups that were talked about in the last bill are highly contested in terms of, there's actually a direct quote from the former chair of the Human Rights Council saying that there's a blatant bias. This is the problem with double standardizing when you demonize a country, when you don't look at any other countries for, this is really where this hurts. This is where this bill becomes anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. Because you're not targeting any other country. You just target the Jewish state, the largest Jewish population in the world. There is no Israeli-only transportation. What there is, or no Jewish-only transportation, what there is like, you have Israeli areas. The same way that you would separate California plates from Arizona license plates, they do separate citizens from non-citizens. But these Israelis are Jews, Muslims, and Christians, not just Jews. You want to scroll down a little bit? And the security fence, I would just like to point out, because it was implemented because of a high number of suicide bombings. Since the separation wall has been put up, most of it is a fence, although that seems to not really be a matter. It's contested how much, but over 90% of suicide bombings have gone down. What that actually has led to is an increase in walk-up fire because they can't get through the wall. You want to go up just a little bit so you can see kind of what this is. Sorry. Okay, General Electric Company. We're talking about helicopters. I apologize for my okay, first fact is Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. That's blatantly confined to pretty much anywhere, including BBC. Israel's policy really is to safeguard. It's safeguarding its citizens from the fact that it's surrounded by hostile neighbors on every side. Imagine a place the size of New Jersey. Imagine in that place that you're looking at the Pacific Ocean, or the Atlantic Ocean, I guess in that case, and that Atlantic Ocean wants to kill you.
Oh, my bad.
And here you can see quotes from the British colonel in Afghanistan and Rachel Goldstone, who was the chair of the UN investigation for Operation Cast Lead, which they showed a picture of in 2008-2009. The Israeli Defense Forces did more to safeguard the rights of civilians and combat zones than any other army in the history of warfare. Civilians were not intentionally targeted as a matter of policy during Israel's operation. Sorry. Okay, so IDF soldiers who violate the IDF code of ethics of harm innocent Palestinian civilians are tried in military courts and when convicted are punished in accordance with the severity of the crime. Israel does not target civilian population, and that you can see that in Gaza, the reason that areas of contention harm a lot of civilians, there's the fact that you have a government, Hamas, in Gaza, that's putting rockets on top of hospitals and schools. So if those rockets are aimed at your country, and you try and get all the civilians out, what are you supposed to do when all the rockets are there, next to the schools and next to hospitals? You leaflet the area in Arabic and Hebrew, and you tell people to get out. You make radio announcements, and you tell people to get out. But you have an organization that was elected that uses human shields, that puts rockets in areas next to civilians. And you can see it here. Israel does not target the civilian population. The majority, 53 to 63% of the Palestinians killed by the IDF were launched since the Second Intifada in 2005 or 2000 have been combatants. In stark contrast, over 70% of the Israelis killed by Palestinian terrorism since 2000 have been civilians.
So Jocelyn, do you want to wrap up the presentation?
Yeah, I got one more point and then I'm done. This is source after source after source. And then Raytheon Project's provision of its guided missiles to the Israeli government, and you can go down a little bit. And it's really just the same point. That Israel's policy is to safeguard its citizens. This is an area that is contested. This is an area that's dangerous. People do die no matter the war. And that's not something I'm refuting. What I'm saying here, though, is that to boycott a country, to boycott my homeland, to boycott an area that's the Jewish state, this is when it's really a matter of being anti-Israel and anti-Semitic.
All right, so let's move on to clarifying questions. I will be taking staff. A lot of questions. So no, we only have 5 minutes for this portion, so I will open up the staff.
Motion to accept. Second.
What happened last week?
So so it's no matter how many times you extend time, everyone's question is not going to be heard and clarified. Just to make that clear. Are you keeping the question on the floor? No? Okay. So,
Point of clarification, sorry. Aren't we also having a huge discussion on this next week?
Yes.
And we have a budget discussion to get to, guys. I'm just running. I know all of you guys' opinions are really important, but we do have a budget discussion to get to, and we're going to have like a huge discussion on this next week, and this is just supposed to be for presentation.
thanks, Becca. So please everyone remember inclusive language. We are going to be discussing this next week, so please honestly do not fool the body with any of those points of clarification that are really statements. Let's not do that to one another, all right? So I'm going to take stack. I'm going to ask everyone to remember to step up, step back. If you do know that you have been vocal during this conversation, just for questions, allow other people space to do that. So I will be taking account of that when I call people out.
I just want to say something. While this conversation was going on, I've seen some people in the crowd that were not exactly respectful and not following our community agreements. So I want to remind everyone that we do have to do that and not snicker and not shake our heads at what's going on.
Thanks, Penny. And thank you everyone for being brave enough to check one another, all right? It's good to do that in this space. All right, so I have Alfonso. Go ahead, as soon as I look you in the eye, you can put your hand down. Go ahead, Alfonso.
I just want to know, can you list a few of the independent experts? I'm just trying to get a sense of like...
Independent experts for what specifically?
You had most of your sources were from independent experts. I'm not sure what that
Oh.
means.
I mean, we can go through the list, or would it be better if I can give you the document, you can see them yourself.
Will that be available to all of us?
Yeah, I can make it readily available to anybody who wants it.
Okay.
I was just
Yeah, and it includes all the sources that were on the original document as well.
DC, can this be sent out with everything else we've been?
Yes, so everything that y'all are seeing today will be sent out. My only stipulation is all the sources be there readily available.
Yeah, I mean, they're
Yeah,
all-
you all are good. So everything, you all will receive everything. Where's that email list real quick? Right over here. So make sure that email list keeps going. All right. Was your question answered, Alfonso?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I have Alfonso, then I put blue shirt over here. Sorry.
So I understood why divesting would allow the Palestinian students to feel comfortable, and affiliates feel more comfortable on campus, which is like a goal for a whole campus and the space, and to make everyone feel comfortable. So I'm wondering, how would divesting make you feel uncomfortable, or the Jewish or Israeli communities or any affiliates feel uncomfortable? Okay.
So yeah, I actually have dual citizenship, so I'm Israeli and I'm American. So what this bill does, even though it states that it's not directly targeting Israel, the fact that Israel is such a corner in the bill, when it's passed, I don't want to be afraid to say, like, I'm Israeli, and people will know that there's a divestment bill against Israel, and I'm scared that people are just going to connotate Israel, this horrible country, even though, I mean, it's only a few companies, but it's the connotation behind it, and it's really scary to think that, like, the university is going to divest from a country that I'm a citizen of.
So the problem is that every point in this bill can be refuted, and you'll see it when it's sent out to you as well. It places an unfair bias against a country that is the Jewish homeland. Nearly 50% of the global population of Jews live in Israel, and it's the only one being targeted. This is an attack on Jews.
All right. So I have Becca and then Kayla.
So I'm just wondering what your basis is for saying that we're anti-Semitic and that we're not addressing things like Syria, because two of the people who just gave this presentation before were Jewish, and like I know personally Syria is very important to me. Some of my family's from there. Assad massacred the village where my family's from. So I'd like to know what your basis for saying that we're anti-Jewish or that we're not speaking out on other issues is.
I mean,
Yeah. First of all, I want to acknowledge that not every single Jew speaks for the entire Jewish community, and that everybody speaks for themselves. In addition to that, we were not calling any specific people anti-Semitic. We were saying that the rhetoric in this specific resolution is putting a double standard on Israel and promoting an unfair double standard of Israel rather than the global community. So that's why we feel that the resolution itself, rather than anybody presenting the resolution, is anti-Semitic.
So it's a great question, but basically it comes down to this. When you demonize a country with rhetoric saying that it doesn't have a right to defend itself, which is by saying that it shouldn't have missiles because of, it invests in Raytheon, like that's placing a double standard on it. That's demonizing a country, giving a country, like not allowing a country to defend itself when it's bombarded with rockets, suicide bombers, lives in terror. 1 million people, that's a sizable portion of Israel lives under constant threat of rocket fire. Doesn't matter whether they're just Hamas rockets, it's any rocket fire. And you look at it if a rocket hit Santa Cruz, we already saw what happened during 9/11. We saw the U.S. response to the bombings in Boston. One person did that. And that's the massive response that the U.S. gets. Nobody questions that. But 8,000 rockets are launched at Israel, and somehow that's not okay to respond.
If I may add, if you Google the definition of anti-Semitism, the U.S. has, under the definition of demonizing, delegitimizing, and double standard are all, also comparing Israel to apartheid South Africa is considered anti-Semitism under the U.S.'s definition of anti-Semitism.
In the EU.
That comes directly from the State Department.
Yeah, so that is, comparing it at all to apartheid South Africa is anti-Semitism.
All right, so please remember to keep all comments and responses as well to under 2 minutes. So I have Kayla, then Fatima. I have your.
This might be kind of a dumb question.
Could you speak up, please, Kayla?
So I was trying to do some Googling, and I'm not entirely sure because in both sides presented, it sounded like in one, it was occupied Palestinian areas versus rightfully which is it actually? Is it actually occupied areas, or is it actually rightfully, Israeli or Palestinian? I'm just not completely clear, I'm sorry.
Okay, so the contention comes under the fact of basically international law, if you have a defensive war, then any land that you gain is considered legitimate and it's considered yours. If it's considered an offensive war, then then that's not considered, you're supposed to give the land back after you win. So that's where people argue, was it a defensive war? What is it an offensive war? The 6-Day War was not launched by Israel. It was Arab neighbors that attacked Israel. You can look at it over and over again. 1948 was the War of Independence. The day that Israel was signed as a country was attacked by by Arab neighbors. A lot of Palestinians actually left their homes the same way that anybody here would probably leave their homes in a war. The JNF that started the Zionist movement during World War II actually bought up most of the land in Israel. And you can see that because they were given money by a whole bunch of Jews in Eastern and Western Europe during World War II that Jews felt unsafe. And they bought up land actually in Egypt, in Syria, in Israel, because they really didn't know where it was going to be and what the British mandate would potentially allow if it was ever passed. So it's legitimate. UN Resolution 242 says that the West Bank is not occupied territory it's occupied territory, but legally occupied by Israel. Gaza was given back in 2005.
As was the Sinai Peninsula.
As was the Sinai Peninsula. The Golan Heights is also still contested, but was also one in a defensive